Hi everyone, we're continuing our series on KHAS-TV.com regarding severe weather, and joining us once again is Eddy Weiss of Chasing for Life. And Eddy, we are in the initial phases of severe weather season. Certainly we can see tornadoes in the month of March, but it's primarily April, May, and June. Every year it's the same drill. We invite people to make a plan, to think about severe weather. The reality is folks have lived in Nebraska for years. Many of them have never seen a tornado. Many of them have never experienced, many have. We talk about preparedness. Define that for us, first of all.
Preparedness is really a matter of education beforehand. That's really what the basis of preparedness needs to be. We talk about resilience. Disaster resilience has become more of the phrase than disaster preparedness. And I believe that the Nebraska people are resilient people. That doesn't always translate to a resilient community. And that's an education issue. I think that people aren't aware of what could happen. If you educate yourself regarding what could happen, you're going to start thinking about what you would do if it did. And that's really the first step in preparedness. Because the minute you start to think about what could happen, you're now going to be forced to begin to make a plan. And so it carries that way. It's a progressive thing. But it's got to start with that education. And I think that people don't want to know. They don't want to know, or they don't believe that it could happen. TV has made things a distant fact for us. Greensburg, how sad. Greensburg, how far away. Parkersburg, how sad, but Parkersburg, how far away. So I think TV has created a psychological distance between us and reality. And so, of course, because we're from Nebraska and we do things the hard way, and we always have, the history of the state is just we know how to make it, and we always will. There's no sense in doing anything else. I think if people really took the time and asked themselves, what could happen here, it would force them into the steps of becoming prepared. That would create resilience.
There's always that part of the human psychology, bad things happen to other people.
That's right.
Typically. And so does it take actually having to go through one for people to really start to think, man, I really do need a tornado kit. I mean, I really do need to plan things with my family. I really do need to make those contacts, those communications.
I don't think that it does. I would have said yes, 5-6 years ago, but after Katrina, they did studies where, within weeks of Katrina, there was people all over the country talking about, oh, we need a home disaster kit. But a couple months later, they were no longer concerned about that. It went away. So I don't think that's really what it is. I think that it's a matter of continual education. We don't send our kids to school one day. We send them to school all year. And so, my children go to school for all of these months to learn math. And I think it's the same thing. I think education needs to be a continual thing, and so it's going to take entities like KHAS, Chasing for Life, the Red Cross, Salvation Army to continually keep educational programming in the face of the American public, because it needs to be continual. That seems to be what brings about the results in a community where people finally start to see it. Unfortunately, tragedy really doesn't last that long.
Yeah. It really comes down to reinforcement, though.
It does.
Hopefully, throughout that course, we can push a button that will be the motivational button to make people actually
That's
act. Right. What, in your mind, if folks could come away with one particular thing that they need to address before severe weather season in the Great Plains, what would that be? What
they would do. And think through those scenarios. Not what would I do if I was at home. Our children know what to do when they're at school, because the principal and the teachers have told them that. They've drilled it. But drill this in your mind. Drill this while you're at work, when you're out and about, when you're in your car driving, and when you're at home, and at church, when you're out with a community organization. What would you do if this was the moment? If this was the moment that the sirens went off, if this was the moment that the sky turned color, if this was the moment when debris started flying, where would you go? And how fast could you get there? I think when I speak to kindergarten groups, and I always ask them, what do you do when severe weather's coming? They all say, take cover. Ask yourself the question, where and how fast can I do it?
And there's the communication issue amongst the family, because there is, one thing I learned in the Grand Island tornado, there is a period of disorientation.
Absolutely.
I've had people say that we wanted to go home. There were some folks that were working at their business. They hid in the locker room. We wanted to go home. We didn't know where home was. There were no landmarkers anymore. We just sat on the curb for a couple of hours,
right,
and just sort of in a state of shock. there has to be some preliminary communication and some contact people.
There does. Trauma.
What's the strategy there?
Trauma is trauma, and you can reduce the amount of trauma to your children by sitting down and coming up with a communication plan. You can reduce it by sitting down and saying, if Mommy and Daddy are ever separated from you, if you are at the park and Mom and Dad are home, and all of a sudden something happens and you're whisked into another building or another home, and we're separated. If our home's not here when that's over, this is where Mom and Dad are going to be. We're all going to meet at this place. Have that place where you guys are going to meet. Have that communication plan with the rest of your family as well. I mean, we saw that just in Kearney, where there was people from Wood River trying to reach relatives in Kearney. Have an out-of-town contact. Have one person that your whole family knows. You know, Aunt Sally lives up in Bolus. And maybe that's her. You know, and maybe that's Uncle Herb and he lives in Minnesota. But make sure your family knows how to get back in touch. It's that the faster you can reconnect, the more you're going to minimize trauma afterwards. You're also going to minimize responders' work. You may not be missing. You just didn't tell me where you were going to be.
Right.
So now I'm looking for you, and I've convinced 3 other firefighters to help look for you, and you're up in Bolus with Aunt Sally, and,
right.
and I didn't know that's where we were going to meet.
Right. Preparation, key to survival and to your safety in severe weather season. We will be discussing these things throughout the season. Thanks for being with us, and join us again, KHAS-TV.com. Thanks, Eddie.